Hey guys, today we begin with a man whose idea of divine genius involved public orgies and making senators watch. Emperor Gaius Julius Caesar, Augustus Germanicus, better known to history as Caligula, the most chaotic Roman emperor to ever mix religion, power, and very poor impulse control. The air is thick with the smell of jasmine and dread. You're watching the sun set over the forum, and everything in your world, the cobblestones, the bustling markets, the familiar, comforting rhythm of common life is about to vanish. You probably won't survive this. You're about to enter a world where reality bends to the will of a single, deeply disturbed mind, and your life expectancy can be measured in breaths, not years. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. In Rome, the worst thing that can happen isn't being invisible. It's being noticed, especially by the people who collect humans the way others collect marble busts. You're minding your own business, probably polishing something that belongs to someone richer than you. Perhaps a bronze likeness of Tiberius that you secretly hope will one day be melted down. When a man in uniform stops you mid-task, he looks you over the way a tax collector looks at a ledger. The sheer insolence of his presence freezes the blood in your veins. This isn't a summons for a tax audit or military service. This is something far more intimate and far more terrifying. The emperor requires attendance, he says. Not a question, not even a sentence really. Just a notification that your life has been updated without consent, its code irrevocably corrupted. There is no appeal, no hesitation. To question the command of the Familia Caesaris is to volunteer for public execution. Your autonomy, that small, fragile thing you cherished in the anonymous crowds of the city, is already gone. Before you can protest, you're walking through the forum surrounded by statues that all look like they're judging your posture. Vendors stare, their eyes wide with a mixture of pity and morbid fascination. Beggars mutter. Someone tells you to smile because it's an honor. You try, but your face refuses to cooperate, locked in a mask of primal, silent terror. This isn't an honor. It's a hijacking. You have been taken from a world of predictable danger, the crush of the crowd, the unfair price of bread, into a danger that is beautiful, gilded, and utterly arbitrary. The Palatine Hill rises ahead like a promise and a threat. The imperial palace glitters in the sun, marble, gold, and enough self-importance to be visible from space. This structure, the Domus Augustiana, is the physical manifestation of Roman auctoritas, the sacred and untestable authority of the emperor, and it is here that you will become a living exhibit of his power. You're ushered inside. Everything smells expensive, sandalwood, myrrh, aged olive oil, but beneath the fragrance, there's a faint, metallic scent you recognize as fear. The walls are painted with gods doing questionable things, which feels appropriate. They take your belongings, your worn tunic, your wooden comb, your single coin for luck, and replace them with silence. A steward gives you new clothes, better food, and a long list of things you're never allowed to do again, starting with speak unless spoken to. It's all very organized, like joining a cult that pays in fear and linen. Other attendants glance at you as you pass. Some smile, a few fleetingly, Most don't. They've learned that expressions are a form of gambling, and they are not interested in losing. You hear rumors immediately that the emperor sleeps little, eats too much, and changes personalities more often than his sandals. You're advised to avoid eye contact, but not too much. He might think you're plotting something. The tightrope you must walk is instantly apparent. Be present, but not too present. Be invisible, yet always available. Your new room has soft linen sheets and a view of the city. Proof that luxury and anxiety can absolutely coexist. As you lie awake that first night, you hear music, laughter, and something that sounds suspiciously like weeping, maybe both. The palace is an orchestra of conflicting emotions, all tuned to a discordant pitch. You tell yourself you're lucky. You tell yourself this is promotion, not punishment. But as dawn breaks over the marble rooftops, casting a cold, hard light on the ceiling frescoes, you realize something chilling. You've been invited to live inside power, and a power in Rome always eats its guests, one small, terrifying piece at a time. Your gilded cage, you realize, is meticulously built to keep the fear in, not the world out. From the outside, the imperial palace looks like paradise with plumbing. You'd think a place with marble floors imported from Numidia and Phrygia, golden ceilings painted with scenes of conquering gods, and its own indoor waterfall might inspire awe. And it does, right up until you realize every drop of that luxury was built on someone else's panic. The moment you enter, the air changes. It's perfumed, heavy, and polite in the way venom is polite before it kills you. This isn't just an administrative building. It's a closed ecosystem where the natural laws of cause and effect have been suspended, replaced by the chaotic whims of a single, powerful organism. The halls stretch forever, lined with guards who stare straight ahead. These are not merely legionaries. They are the Praetorian Guard, the Emperor's personal, elite cohort, and their loyalty is not to Rome, but to the man who pays them. Their presence is less about protection and more about omnipresence. They are the eyes and ears of Caesar, and they are not disciplined because they are noble. They are silent because looking anywhere else, noticing anything unusual, or betraying a single human emotion has consequences they have already witnessed. They are a constant, clanking reminder that you are always being watched, even when you feel most alone. You're shown the layout by a steward who could guide you blindfolded. He walks briskly, never slowing down, reciting rules like he's describing the weather or perhaps listing the ingredients for a fatal poison. Don't speak in the emperor's presence. Don't look at the emperor unless he speaks. Don't breathe too loudly near the emperor. You start to wonder how anyone survives a full conversation here, where every synapse firing in your brain could be interpreted as insubordination. The tension is a physical force, pressing down on your chest, making every breath a calculated risk. The servants you pass move like ghosts, silent and precise. They're masters of the omerta, the sworn silence of the powerful household. They don't make eye contact. They have refined eye avoidance into an art form, a necessary trick in a place where connection is dangerous and empathy is a death wish. They move through the vast, open spaces designed by the architects to impress visitors and, crucially, to minimize hiding places like shadows clinging to the periphery of the light. The architecture itself, with its expansive atriums and long colonnades, is an extension of the emperor's surveillance. There are no secrets in this palace, only moments of deferred discovery. When one drops a Koopa common clay drinking vessel shattered on the imported Marmara marble floor, nobody gasps. Nobody helps. They just wait, frozen in position, because the sound of breaking glass travels faster than gossip, and both are quickly followed by the hand of punishment. The silence is profound, heavy with unspoken dread, and you realize this is the true measure of the palace's power, the ability to stop time with a minor accident. Soon enough, a guard appears to remove the problem, the shards, and the servant. The lesson is swift and brutal. In this world of divine perfection, there is no tolerance for human error, no matter how small. Meals in the palace are grand, but never relaxing. The food is perfect, pheasant roasted with honey, delicate dormice glazed in poppy seeds, mountains of fresh figs and dates. The tension is not. Every bite is chewed carefully, slowly, meticulously, because there's always the chance someone poisoned something. Not out of hatred, but as a career opportunity, a way to eliminate a rival or simply prove their effectiveness. Even laughter feels dangerous, brittle, like dry parchment ready to ignite. If you laugh too heartily, you might be mocking someone. If you don't laugh enough, you might be judging the emperor's wit. The safe middle ground is a tightrope of forced, polite amusement. At night, the palace doesn't sleep. It simmers. It is, in fact, built around the emperor's own chronic insomnia. You hear footsteps echoing through the long corridors, the peristylium and crypto-porticus, muffled commands, and the low, constant hum of people trying to exist quietly enough to survive. The emperor's personal guards patrol constantly, their armor clinking like wind chimes made of bad decisions. That subtle, metallic sound is the soundtrack to your fear. Somewhere beyond the next wall, music plays. Flutes, lyres, voices singing praises you can't quite believe. This music is not for enjoyment. It is to soothe the emperor's restless spirit, and you know that if the music stops, something terrible has happened. You lie awake on your soft linen bed, staring at the carved ceiling, and you realize something horrifying, a truth whispered by every nervous breath you take. The palace isn't built to protect the emperor from the world. It's built to protect everyone else from him. And as the torches flicker in the hallway, casting long, dancing shadows, you understand the unspoken truth whispered among the servants. In Caligula's palace, silence isn't peace, it's a survival policy, strictly enforced, and you are now a permanent, terrified resident of the marble mausoleum he calls home. You meet him for the first time on a day that smells like olive oil and overconfidence. Gaius Julius Caesar. Augustus Germanicus, better known as Caligula, doesn't walk into a room. He arrives like thunder, pretending to be a man, a natural phenomenon that demands not just respect, but utter prostration. His robe is purple, the royal shade Tyrian purple reserved exclusively for emperors and people who like reminding everyone else they're not. This isn't a mere garment. It's a statement of absolute, non-negotiable status. The crowd of attendants lowers their heads as one, a swift, synchronized dip that suggests they're auditioning for a synchronized bowing team. You do the same, mostly because you suddenly enjoy breathing and feel a desperate need to continue the simple, mechanical process of oxygen exchange. When you dare a glance up, you see the kind of face sculptors pretend not to copy. Sharp, symmetrical, and constantly shifting between amusement and irritation. Caligula's smile looks generous until you realize it's the sort a cat gives a cornered, mouse purely observational, containing no promise of mercy. His eyes, the sources say, were deep-set and intense, almost hypnotic, and they dart around the room, settling on various people with an unnerving, random curiosity. He doesn't introduce himself. Introductions are for mortals. He asks questions that aren't questions, but loyalty checks delivered with the gentle tone of a friend. Do you serve well? Are you loyal? Would you die for your emperor? You answer, yes, yes, and judging by your pulse, probably. Every word is a prayer, every syllable a negotiation for another day of existence. Everyone calls him Divine Caesar. Now, remember the background. He started small, declaring himself the beloved of Jupiter. Within a few months, he dropped the beloved part and claimed to be Jupiter himself, or at least a physical manifestation of various gods, often appearing dressed as Mercury, Hercules, or even Venus. This self-deification, the embrace of the imperial cult beyond all sane boundaries, wasn't just narcissism. It was a political move designed to remove any mortal constraints on his authority. Statues of the gods were recarved to bear his face. Jupiter's beard, which you recall was long and magnificent, had to be smoothed down and replaced with Caligula's sharp jawline, much to the chagrin of the sculptors. Some say he even debated Neptune, god of the sea, by having his soldiers shout and flog the waves during a storm until they technically surrendered. It worked, technically, and the absurdity only reinforced the terror. You quickly learn that Caligula's palace isn't just his home, it's his stage. Every gesture is theater, every audience mandatory. When he laughs, the entire court laughs, a nervous, collective sound, like dry leaves scuttling across the marble. When he stops, the silence hits like a verdict. It's less a government and more a hostage situation with better catering and an inexhaustible supply of Falernian wine. There are people who say he's brilliant, that his madness is just misunderstood genius. Those people are still alive, which probably explains their enthusiasm. The rest learned that disagreeing with a living god has a short career path, usually ending with a quick, brutal lesson in celestial judgment. He doesn't need to argue, he simply decrees, and your reality changes instantly. You leave the audience chamber dizzy, both from fear and from the sheer weight of the perfume in the air. You've just experienced the phenomenon of absolute power filtered through a diseased mind. Somewhere behind you, the Emperor is still talking about glory, destiny, and something involving the moon that sounds increasingly unhinged. You don't know what any of it means in terms of policy or governance. You just know one thing. Rome's most dangerous man, the man whose childhood nickname, Caligula, Little Boot, now rings with menace, believes he's immortal. And unfortunately, you work for him, trapped in a performance where your life depends on your ability to applaud the impossible. You don't sleep that first night. Not because anyone told you not to, but because you're smart enough to realize no one ever sleeps easily in Caligula's palace. How could they? The anxiety is a physical weight, pressing the air out of the room. You lie there on the soft linen, a luxury your body finds entirely irrelevant, listening to the palace breathe. Low, unnatural sound punctuated by the clinking armor of the guards. You're waiting for the inevitable, because in this world, silence only precedes a scream. When a guard finally appears at your door, hours past midnight when the body craves oblivion, you're halfway between panic and resignation. You didn't need the knock. You felt his approach in the tension of the air, the subtle shift in the sounds outside. He doesn't speak. He just gestures for you to follow, his face an emotionless mask, his armor clinking in a rhythm that sounds less like a walk and more like a countdown. You're led through hallways so polished they reflect torchlight like liquid gold, or, more accurately, like something waiting to catch fire. The palace at night feels different. The daytime chatter, the forced pleasantries of the courtiers, the nervous bustle, all gone. Now it is silent, the marble echoing with only footsteps and whispers that seem to materialize out of the shadows. Somewhere down another corridor, you hear laughter, the loud, unsteady kind that never ends well for someone. It's a sound that doesn't convey joy, but rather a manic desperation. You arrive at a chamber guarded by statues of gods with judgmental expressions. The guard opens the door, and inside sits Caligula, lounging on a couch in a triclinium, the traditional Roman dining arrangement. He is surrounded by an obscene amount of food, wine that could drown a small village, and half-asleep attendants who look like they're praying with their eyes open, their bodies slack with exhaustion, their minds hyper-alert. This is not dinner. This is a siege of the senses. He doesn't acknowledge you right away. You stand there, a new piece of furniture in his elaborate tableau of excess. He's busy telling a story to no one in particular about how he once talked to the moon, Luna, and it agreed he was divine. He explains the celestial logistics with the casual certainty of a man discussing the price of bread. No one laughs. They've all heard this story before, and the effort of producing genuine mirth at 2 a.m. is too great, too risky. When he finally looks at you, it's like standing too close to lightning. "New?" he says, his voice deceptively mild, as if identifying a piece of furniture. He waves a hand, scattering airily. "Sit, eat, smile." You do all three carefully, meticulously, as though performing sacred rites that require absolute precision. The pressure is immense. You are now performing for your life, and the director is unstable. The food tastes like anxiety and salt. He forces you to eat lavishly, urging you to try the honey-roasted peacock. Caligula watches you eat with an unnerving, clinical interest, as though measuring how fear affects digestion. He wants to see you break bread in his divine presence, a sign of your willing participation in his reality. You find yourself chewing deliberately, reminding yourself of the story Domina told you about the man executed for rude mastication. Then, as quickly as he appeared, his attention shifts to someone else. He asks a senator, a man whose face is etched with chronic fatigue and political dread, to sing a jaunty folk tune. He orders a Praetorian guard to juggle the gilded plates. He commands a slave to dance a frenzied Bacchic ritual. No one dares fail. You realize then that you're not in a dining hall. You're in a continuous, unscripted test. Everyone in the room exists solely to prove how entertaining survival can look, dancing on the knife edge of his boredom. The humiliation is palpable, yet silent. The senator's voice cracks on a high note. The guard fumbles a plate but catches it before it hits the marble, and the slave dances until his breath is ragged. They're all being consumed in real time by his need for spectacle. And you, watching from the relative safety of your dining couch, know your turn is only postponed, not cancelled. Eventually, Caligula grows bored, the moon story finished and the entertainment exhausted. He claps his hands once, the sound sharp and final in the echoing room. He stands, his purple robe pooling on the floor like a dark stain, and leaves without a word. The air itself seems to exhale. The remaining courtiers and attendants slump, their tension visibly dissipating, replaced by the crushing exhaustion of a performance successfully concluded. You're told you may go. You do, quietly, quickly, and without looking back, clinging to the shadows as you retreat. In any other household, you'd call it a strange evening. In Caligula's palace, it's just Tuesday, and somehow you've passed your first night alive, which around here counts as a major promotion, a temporary reprieve from the divine judgment of the Emperor. You understand now. The most dangerous weapon Caligula wields is not the sword, but the destruction of predictable time. You don't get a mentor, you get a handler. A woman who's been here so long she's forgotten her original name, perhaps out of self-preservation, perhaps simply because her identity has been overwritten by the palace. Everyone just calls her Domina, which literally means mistress or lady of the house, but probably isn't her real name either. It's a title of rank and experience in the Familia Caesaris, the vast household of the Emperor. But you don't ask questions. Around here, curiosity is like dessert, tempting but usually fatal. Domina doesn't shout or scold. She just points at things and explains how not to die near them, her voice flat and entirely devoid of judgment or empathy. She's a professional survivalist. That tapestry, she says, pointing to a magnificent but faded woven scene. Don't touch it. It belonged to Tiberius. Caligula hates it. He keeps it there to hate it properly, as a symbol of the past he despises. This is your first lesson. Objects have emotional significance to a god, and disrespecting them is a crime. If he smiles at you, bow, she instructs, her eyes steady. If he laughs, stay still. If he stops laughing, start praying, because the pause means a decision is being made. Your training isn't about skill. You already know how to fetch, clean, and pour wine. It's about silence. You learn to walk without sound, gliding across the marble floors like an umbra, a ghost. You practice standing without moving, using a posture so still you could be mistaken for one of the smaller statues, and you learn to speak without meaning it, offering words that are pure sonic flattery, devoid of any genuine thought. You practice smiling in a mirror until it looks sincere enough to fool a sociopath, a mask of forced, radiant, but utterly vacant cheerfulness. By the end of the week, you can mimic cheerfulness like a professional actor trapped in a horror play. Meals are part of the education, too. You're taught how to eat in front of nobles without making eye contact or chewing too audibly. Apparently, the Emperor once executed a man for rude mastication, the simple, gross offense of chewing your food too loudly. You realize this arbitrary rule is the point. It's not about manners, it's about control. When the rules are impossible and random, terror becomes systemic, and no one is safe. You don't even know what rude mastication truly means, but you stop enjoying food anyway, treating every bite as a potential fatal error. Sometimes Domina tests you. She'll drop a cup just to see if you flinch. You do, every time, your muscles contracting into a defensive knot. Good, she says flatly, retrieving the cup without looking at you. It means you're paying attention. You begin to understand that fear isn't a weakness here. It's currency. The more alert you are, the faster your reflexes are, the longer you last. It is the fuel of this machine. At night, you share quarters with other attendants, all pretending to sleep while secretly listening for footsteps outside the door. Someone always mutters prayers to the old Roman gods, a desperate appeal to a higher power that clearly isn't answering. Someone else always cries, their sobs muffled into the expensive linen. No one tells them to stop. That's considered teamwork, allowing a temporary, quiet release of the pressure so it doesn't explode publicly. Once you ask Domina how long she served, she shrugs, a gesture that carries the weight of decades. 3 emperors, she says, her gaze distant. One died naturally. You don't ask which one. That information is useless. You just nod, profoundly impressed by her continued existence, a testament to her mastery of this lethal environment. You realize she is less a human and more a monument to fear-based accuracy. By the end of the month, you've learned how to anticipate orders before they're spoken. You've also learned that survival here isn't about loyalty, a fleeting, easily discarded concept. It's about accuracy. One wrong word, one wrong glance, one sigh too loud, and you're no longer part of the decor. You're part of the cleanup. The gilded life of the imperial court requires you to become a polished, silent weapon of service, and you will use your fear to sharpen yourself until you are dangerously, visibly effective. Banquet nights in Caligula's palace aren't dinners. They are public endurance tests wrapped in gold leaf, psychological crucibles disguised as lavish social gatherings. The invitations alone are a death sentence written in cursive. Refuse, and you insult a god, which is immediate, lethal treason. Attend, and you spend the night pretending you're having the best time of your soon-to-be short life, navigating a minefield of manners and madness. You help prepare the feast, a spectacle so extravagant it could feed a small province, or at least one particularly determined senator. The sheer, deliberate excess is a show of power, a constant reminder that the emperor's wealth and control are boundless. Tables groan under the weight of roasted peacocks, with their feathers reattached for display, exotic fish hauled in from 3 different seas just to die expensively, and delicate skewers of flamingo tongues and dormice glazed with honey foods meant to prove that mere expense is no object to the divine Caesar. The wine, often rare, aged Falernian, never stops flowing, though no one dares drink enough to forget where they are. Sobriety in this environment is a crucial defensive measure. The guests arrive in togas so heavy with embroidery they could double as armor. Senators, generals, poets, and a few people who have no idea why they were invited. Perhaps they simply caught the emperor's eye on the street hall lined up like sacrifices disguised as social climbers. They exchange strained, formal greetings, their eyes darting nervously to the main entrance. You move silently among them, pouring wine, refilling plates, and adhering strictly to Domina's lessons on invisibility, avoiding direct eye contact with anyone who looks powerful enough to ruin you for blinking incorrectly. Then, the emperor enters. The room stiffens, the collective intake of breath audible even over the quiet music. Caligula strolls in barefoot, a calculated gesture that underscores his transcendence of human formality, often wearing a crown of fresh flowers, or, more ominously, a crown of jewels. He wears that unsettling half-smile that suggests someone, somewhere, is about to regret existing. He greets no one, yet everyone greets him. A chorus of rehearsed salutations that sound less like welcome and more like supplication. He doesn't eat. He observes, like a cat surrounded by nervous mice in expensive sandals, his energy focused entirely on judgment. The entertainment begins. Dancers, musicians, poets reading verses that rhyme suspiciously with flattery and divine glory. Caligula interrupts them constantly, his suggestions usually involving less clothing, more discomfort, or a swift, humiliating change of character. Laughter ripples through the room, brittle, desperate laughter that sounds like coins falling into a well. This is the choreography of collective fear. Laugh quickly, laugh loudly, and stop exactly when the emperor does. Sometimes he plays games. He'll point at a guest, a high-ranking senator perhaps, and demand they describe the divine beauty of Caesar. There's only one correct answer, something along the lines of unmatched, celestial, or more glorious than Sol Invictus. Anything less than religious awe, anything that hints at human reservation or simple politeness, earns a polite, slow smile and a guard's hand on your shoulder. You've seen that smile before. It never ends well. The unfortunate guest will be removed, not necessarily executed, but permanently reassigned to a fate that everyone knows is worse than death, perhaps running the latrines or being forced to live in the palace gardens and bark like a dog. As the night drags on, the air turns thick with perfume, wine, and raw panic. You keep your head low, your tray steady, your soul on standby. Around you, power and terror swirl together like smoke, intoxicating, suffocating, and impossible to escape. The atmosphere of a Roman convivium meant for fellowship and political networking has been weaponized into a relentless psychological attack. By dawn, the guests are gone, having executed their social duties. The music is over, the elaborate tables empty, and the tired servants begin the massive clean-up. Only the fear stays. It always does, seeping into the marble, waiting for the next night's performance. By now, you've learned that Caligula doesn't host events. He stages productions. Everything in his world is theater, and unfortunately, everyone is cast without consent. He calls it entertainment for the people, a populist gesture designed to showcase the magnificence of the divine state. You call it a public relations disaster waiting for divine approval, but you don't get to name things here. You just appear when summoned and hope the next scene doesn't involve you being cast as the antagonist. The emperor has decided that the palace should no longer be private. Mortals deserve to witness their god in action. So the massive, gilded gates open, the crowd floods in, and suddenly your workplace has an audience. This move is politically shrewd, a way to bypass the elite and secure the love of the plebeians. Senators stand shoulder to shoulder with bakers, children, and soldiers. The entire hierarchy of Rome momentarily collapsed, all staring wide-eyed at the spectacle of wealth, wine, and people trying not to faint from stress or awe. Everything is exaggerated for the public gaze. The decorations are grander, the feasts more excessive, the flattery louder. Even the applause sounds nervous, a strange, hesitant drumming that rises and falls with the emperor's attention. Musicians perform until their fingers cramp. Actors recite endless verses about Caligula's greatness, claiming his lineage traces back beyond the legendary founders of Rome. And every time someone calls him divine, he nods like he's just remembering it's true, savoring the collective affirmation. You stand off to the side, balancing a tray of imported delicacies and trying to look both invisible and enthusiastic. Difficult and deeply exhausting combination. You perfect the technique of looking past the emperor, not at him, while maintaining a slight, deferential bend in your spine. A senator accidentally spills wine on his embroidered robe. You can see the pure electric panic flash across his face. This minor accident, this human flaw, could be lethal. Within seconds, however, he's laughing, loud and forced, and calling it an offering to Caesar, a sacrifice of my own vanity. Caligula beams, instantly appeased by the quick-witted transformation of error into devotion. Crisis averted. For now. This is the level of improvisation required to survive the imperial theater. Then come the reenactments, historical scenes retold with the emperor in the starring role. He plays gods, heroes, conquerors, often all at once, shifting costumes and personas with bewildering speed. The supporting cast is made up of whoever looks the most terrified, their genuine distress mistaken for compelling acting. You've been lucky so far, but you know it's only a matter of time before you're handed a costume and told to look inspired. One afternoon, he stages a naval victory in the vast courtyard. This is a reference to his famous, baffling military campaign against Britain, which ended with him ordering his men to collect seashells on the shore. There's no water here, just blue cloth and imagination. He stands on a platform, shouts orders to invisible ships and phantom enemies, and throws cheap bread to the crowd, declaring it spoils of war. The crowd cheers, mostly because the Praetorian Guard is watching their level of enthusiasm. When it's over, Caligula bows deeply, as if expecting thunderous applause from the heavens themselves. The crowd obliges with a frantic, relieved roar. You clap too, not because you want to, but because you enjoy having functional hands. As you file back inside, scrubbing the courtyard clean of bread and false glory, you realize the profound truth. You don't live in Rome anymore. You live in a theater where tragedy pays better than comedy, where the costuming is exquisite and where the curtain never closes. The palace is a spectacle designed to project absolute power onto the masses, while simultaneously terrifying the privileged few who must maintain the illusion up close. Serving Caligula is a bit like serving the weather. Bright sunshine and unexpected generosity one minute, thunderbolts and ruin the next. And if you dare complain, the lightning files a report. You wake up each morning, your nerves already taut, wondering which version of the emperor you're getting today. Will it be generous Caesar, the one who tosses silver coins to servants and calls you his faithful friend? Or will it be wrath of Jupiter, the one who throws gilded furniture because someone sneezed during his lunch speech, disrupting the celestial harmony he perceives? You learn to read the signs with the meticulous care of a scholar reading a fatal prophecy. The tilt of his head, is it curiosity or judgment? The length of his silence, is he reflecting on statecraft or inventing a new form of torture? The number of Praetorian guards standing slightly too close, a subtle indicator of his paranoia. The palace becomes a living barometer, and every inhabitant is perpetually checking the reading. When Caligula laughs too loudly, people start saying prayers, convinced a manic phase is imminent. When he's quiet for too long, they start drafting wills in their heads. Sometimes he's almost charming, demonstrating the charisma that helped him ascend to power in the first place. He compliments your posture, asks about your health with feigned sincerity, even lets you eat warm bread instead of stale leftovers. You almost forget who he is. You start to feel the faint, dangerous warmth of hope. Then, mid-conversation, his expression changes, a subtle flicker in his eyes, and he decides someone in the room is plotting against him, a betrayal as immediate as it is invisible. Everyone immediately becomes an expert in invisibility, freezing mid-motion, praying to melt into the mosaic floor. He loves to surprise people, to invert expectations and logic. Remember that tightrope walk with the applause? Once he strolls into the servants' hall carrying a laurel crown, declaring that the gods have visited him in a dream to confirm his divinity. You, having mastered Domina's lessons, clap enthusiastically but not excessively. He frowns. Why are you clapping? Do you think I'm joking? You instantly stop, your blood turning to ice. Why have you stopped? Are you mocking the gods? You realize this is less an emperor and more an interactive riddle with fatal consequences. The answer is not in loyalty or obedience, but in divining his current whim. On his calmer days, Caligula strolls the vast, manicured gardens, feeding exotic dates to his imported peacocks and reciting pretentious poetry to marble statues of himself. This is his pastoral tyrant phase. On the bad ones, he orders the very same statues flogged for not applauding his verses properly. The gods obey with grim efficiency. It's unclear whether he truly believes the statues can hear him or whether he just enjoys the performance of ultimate, arbitrary power. Either way, no one volunteers to fact-check the emperor's divine hearing. You start keeping track of his moods like a scholar charting a celestial body. Yesterday, benevolent tyrant. Today, storm with human privileges. The palace gossip, always the most reliable news source, call it divine inspiration. You call it Tuesday. This unpredictability is his greatest weapon. It aligns perfectly with the ancient Roman concept of fortuna, a chaotic, uncontrollable fate. But Caligula has personalized it. He is no longer subject to fortuna, he is fortuna. By sunset, the day might end with music, wine, and forced laughter, or with guards dragging someone away for breathing suspiciously. You stop trying to predict outcomes. The only constant in Caligula's moods is that they always have victims. And as you extinguish your lamp each night, you whisper the same prayer everyone in the palace knows by heart, a desperate, shared plea to the heavens. Please, Jupiter, let him be bored tomorrow. Boredom is the closest thing you have to security. You start to suspect the emperor doesn't sleep because he's afraid the gods might hold a meeting without him, or perhaps he simply fears the vulnerability that true unconsciousness brings. For everyone else, this means nights are optional. The palace never truly goes dark. Torches burn along the vast corridors, casting long, shifting shadows that look suspiciously like people you owe apologies to, or perhaps the ghosts of those who displeased Caesar. The rhythm of Roman life, dictated by the sun and the practical necessity of rest, somnus, has been brutally abolished. Somewhere down the long hall, someone's always awake. You hear the low, metallic voices of guards whispering, the soft, frantic pacing of servants trying to finish impossible tasks, and courtiers pretending to read poetry they can't see clearly in the dim light, maintaining the pretense of intellectual endeavor. The emperor's schedule obeys no mortal clock. You could be summoned at dawn, dismissed at noon, then called again at midnight because he's decided the stars are applauding him, and, naturally, someone should witness it to validate the celestial adulation. When a messenger knocks on your door after sunset, their face pale and strained in the torchlight, you don't ask why. You just go. Refusing an invitation from a god is not just insubordination, it is a profound health hazard. The palace at night feels alive, but not in a comforting way. It is a vast, echoing cave where every sound is amplified and every shadow hides a threat. You pass the kitchens where exhausted cooks stare into pots like philosophers searching for meaning, their faces slick with sweat and fatigue. You glimpse musicians, the symphoniati, tuning their lyres and tibiae in silence, hoping they're not being summoned for another improvised hymn about the emperor's glorious digestion. Every face you pass carries the same expression, polite despair, the mask of chronic sleep deprivation. When you finally see Caligula, he's usually pacing barefoot across the marble floors, a detail you remember from the banquets wrapped in a robe that might cost more than a villa. He talks to everyone and no one. Sometimes he recites abstract verses about his destiny. Sometimes he delivers fiery political arguments against invisible enemies, and occasionally both at once. He speaks of great plans, such as appointing his favorite horse, Incitatus, to a high officer joke that is never funny because everyone knows he is half serious, and the logistics for Incitatus's velvet stall are already being drafted. You nod when appropriate and pray he's addressing the air, the columns, or his reflection, and not you. He loves these midnight sessions, believing the cover of darkness lends a unique insight to his divine pronouncements. "The moon understands me," he once says, staring out the vast window at the distant, indifferent celestial body. You agree instantly, desperate to placate the moment. Of course, Caesar. Her light is but a reflection of your own glory. He narrows his eyes, his gaze piercing. You mock me. You panic, your heart hammering against your ribs. Never, my lord. I merely state the truth revealed to all who serve your divinity. He smiles, a thin, satisfied, utterly terrifying line. Good. Then you will stay until dawn to make sure she keeps listening. Stand right here. Do not move. Do not blink more than is necessary. You do. You stand there for hours, a frozen sentinel staring at the moon with a terror you have never known, your muscles cramping, your mind fighting the onset of sleep. The moon doesn't acknowledge either of you. By the time morning comes and the first pale light touches the marble, you've learned that night in Caligula's palace isn't a times. It's an endurance event. Sleep is a myth, like honesty or reasonable emperors. When you finally collapse into bed, moments before you must report for duty, you hear footsteps again, distant but inevitable. Another summons, another performance. You laugh quietly to yourself, a dry, hysterical sound, because at this point, what else is there to do? In Caligula's world, even exhaustion is a privilege, a state earned through survival, and you, lucky you, are very privileged indeed. It takes exactly one mistake to understand, on a visceral, undeniable level, how things truly work in Caligula's palace. Not your mistake, thankfully. Someone else's. You just happen to be standing close enough to learn the lesson vicariously, which, as Domina would attest, is the safest, most efficient way to learn anything around here. It starts innocently enough. A servant, perhaps the same one who cries softly at night, forgets to respond quickly when the emperor speaks. A full second passes, maybe two. In normal human time, that's negligible, the time it takes to draw a single breath. In divine time, it's treason, a silent, unforgivable act of lèse-majesté. The air freezes, a sudden, absolute vacuum in the vast audience hall. Caligula tilts his head like a curious bird spotting an anomaly. The room goes silent, except for the sound of everyone collectively holding their breath, their bodies locked in defensive rigor mortis. The servant stammers, apologizes, drops instantly to their knees. Caligula smiles, not kindly, but with the chilling amusement of a child who has just remembered an amusing game. Then, in the same calm tone one might use to order bread, he tells a guard to remove the hesitation. No one moves for a heartbeat a millisecond of processing the horrifying euphemism. Then they do. You don't look. You don't need to. The message is clearer than any written decree. Hesitation equals rebellion. Speech equals risk. Breathing is tolerated for now, but its continuance is a fragile, moment-to-moment privilege. After that, the rules of survival feel much simpler, reduced to a terrifying, absolute equation. When Caligula laughs, you laugh. When he cries, you cry. When he stares into space, you stare too, intently, just in case the space is looking back. You become fluent in this perverse language of survival. Every nod, every bow, and every word is rehearsed like lines from a tragedy you didn't audition for. Punishments vary depending on his whim. Sometimes it's public humiliation, being forced to kiss a god's sandal or crawl under a table. Sometimes banishment to a remote province, which is often a reprieve. Sometimes it's a stern, frightening lecture about loyalty to his divinity, which is somehow worse because it traps you in his illogical world for longer. You begin to notice that fear is the palace's true architecture. Not marble, not gold, but pure, systemic, efficient anxiety designed to keep every subject off balance. One evening, Caligula catches a respected senator yawning during dinner. The room stops breathing again. The emperor asks him gently, with an unnervingly soft voice, "Am I boring you?" The senator, a quick study, insists, "No, Caesar, I was just overwhelmed by your brilliance, which exhausts my mortal mind." Caligula nods slowly, considering this. Then he orders everyone else to yawn, too. "If he's tired," he says, with absolute gravity, "then we should all be tired. Unity is strength." You stand there, opening your jaw and yawning obediently, tears welling in your eyes from the forced action, wondering if this counts as unity or insanity. Probably both, perfectly fused. When the night finally ends and the senators stumble out, you realize that disobedience in Caligula's Rome isn't just punished. It's choreographed. Everyone learns the steps eventually. Those who don't stop dancing. Caligula doesn't just rule Rome. He directs it, a grand theatrical master, and the palace, with its shimmering marble and echoing halls, is his stage. Everyone inside has a role whether they like it or not. You, unfortunately, are part of the supporting cast. The tragedy is that there's no script, only improvisation and a terrifying, relentless fear. The only way to survive, you realize, is to become less human and more a perfect, polished reflection of his unstable will. You're not a person, you are a function of the palace, and your only purpose is to sustain the illusion of divine, glorious order. The final torch flickers in the hall. The clanking of the guard's armor, the soundtrack of your terror, slowly recedes, swallowed by the vast silence of the sleeping palace. You lean against the cold marble, your body aching, your mind finally beginning to surrender its relentless vigilance. It is over for tonight. The divine performance has paused. Feel the cold stone against your back. It is solid, constant, unlike the shifting moods of the man who owns it. Remember the warmth of your own bed, the silk of the linen sheets, a comfort that has become meaningless. Let the scent of expensive perfume and stale wine drift away. Focus only on the quiet hum of the night, the sound of the world existing outside the terrifying perimeter of the Palatine Hill. You have endured the brilliance and the madness. You have survived the god in sandals. As you finally close your eyes, let the terror dissipate like smoke. There is nothing to fear right now, nothing to watch, nothing to prove. Rest. Let the exhaustion take you, a deep, heavy blanket of oblivion. Sleep. The long night is over, and for a few brief, precious hours, you're only yourself again, safe in the temporary, blessed sanctuary of the dark.